What is the best case scenario for the Jazz in the draft per draft expert Spencer Jones? And what trades seem the most plausible for the Jazz to do? Is it with Philly, or do we have some blockbusters involving veterans? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name's Leaf Tulane, and you guys know that by now, but I'm excited and honored to have the opportunity to fill in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. As many of you guys may know, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan who's a credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant and statistician for the past 4 seasons, lover of college hoops, so don't expect all the geeky numbers that you're accustomed to with David to be gone, but I'll bring you a unique perspective as a diehard hoops fan from the college ranks and watched a ton of these guys, NBA draft analysts, Jazz employee, and most importantly, diehard Jazz fan to make you as knowledgeable as possible about your Utah Jazz. So thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. And today's question is, what do you think is the best outcome for the Jazz in the draft, and who should the Jazz target via a trade? Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And today, I'm joined by Spencer Jones, and we talk about the draft all the time, and we're going to outline what the best case scenario is for the Jazz, discuss the Philly trade rumors and what it means for the Jazz, whether the trade with Philly is with the Jazz or another team, should they trade that third pick. And lastly, we discussed some trade possibilities for the Jazz, who's heading out of Utah and who could be heading in. So let's dive right in. Spencer, we've been talking about this forever. All year long, the Jazz were going to be bad. We were 17-65, but we got the 5th pick. So we don't get Cooper Flag. But what's the best case scenario for the Jazz at 5, and how plausible do you think it is?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, be able to talk some Jazz ball with you. I think for me, my favorite outcome at 5 would be Tre Johnson falling to us in that 5th spot. I really like his value at the 5 spot, but also what he can bring to this Jazz team that really needs a ball handler and someone that can go and create their own offense. And he's someone that I look at who I would actually take at 3 if we were to even trade up. I really like his shot-making ability. It seems like even when he's missing shots, and he takes a lot of tough shots, the misses are good misses, and there is such thing as good misses. And I think he creates a lot of different ways to be successful. Like, I think he can score on ball, he can score off ball, and I think that's something that he's shown that puts him over someone like Ace Bailey, who's also a great shooter.
And so that's another thing I want to delve into, because you and I have talked about Tre Johnson and some of his comparisons. I compared him to Shea, and I understand there's going to be pushback in the sense that, no, he's not the driver. He doesn't get to the line like Shea does. But it's the offensive repertoire and advanced skill set that allures me to have the possibility to play the point guard and be a guy who can score 25. Because the best players that are guards tend to be able to score 25 and create for others and not just be bucket getters. Is that a fair comparison? And what do you see in his game that makes you so excited that you'd say even at pick number 3, you would take him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a fair comparison with the understanding of the caveats that you put with that comparison with SGA. The way I see it, the comparison that I like in that sense is the fact that he's not a true point guard. And you saw it in Texas. He's not a true point guard, but he has playmaking chops, and the ball was in his hand a lot. So he's used to having the ball in his hand. He played point guard in high school, which is something that's different than I think Keontae, where Keontae wasn't a point guard, and we've been trying to get that out of him. And I think in this situation, he has the ability to play make. There was lots of things that happened with Texas. Their spacing was terrible. I feel like they didn't really set him up to be successful from a playmaking standpoint with the team that they had around him. And I think that's something that can be untapped and people didn't get to see. And I think that's something that's in his game. And with regards to Shea, there's just the size. Like, he's going to be 6'6" in shoes. I think he measured at 6'4" 3/4 without shoes on. And to have a jumbo-sized playmaker, you're seeing it more and more. In all the teams that are really good, they have someone that has the ball in their hand a lot who's tall and has positional size.
I'm fully with you there, and I think he's the best shooter in the first round of the draft. We talked about this on Locked On Jazz on Monday for the Everydayers. He shot 54% going left and 50% going right off of screens. He's an off-ball weapon. So if you want to compare him to Devin Booker, that's perfectly fine with me. Devin Booker at Kentucky was shooting curls and was not a high option on that team. This is a guy who's the leading scorer on a team that was playing in a league where there's 18 teams and 14 of them made the tournament. Like, he was excellent. And you're aware of that. But what is the long term outcome that you see as so alluring for for Tre, that makes it so it's not crazy to say he could be like Shea, that makes it so it's not crazy to say he could be Devin Booker or Bradley Beal? What is like year 3, year 4 of him look like on the Utah Jazz?
On the Utah Jazz, I think it's good that you've kind of verified that as the Jazz, because I think if you were to go to a team like the 76ers, that outcome looks a lot different because of where we're at. We're going to allow him to have the ball in his hands a lot, whereas I think if he goes to a team like the Sixers, he's going to be playing off ball much more. So the way I see it, I think he becomes one of those primary ball handlers, not necessarily dubbed as the point guard, but he's going to bring the ball up and initiate offense. And 3-4 years down the road, I wouldn't be surprised if he's averaging 20 to 25 a game. I think saying All NBA would be pushing it. And even an All-Star maybe by year 3 is a bit maybe preposterous or crazy. But I do see that further down the road. But year 3 or 4, I could see him averaging 25 points a game. And it may sound crazy, but 6 to 7 assists, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
I'm with you. Look, I just pulled up Devin Booker's stats, and so if you guys are criticizing the sense that he doesn't get to the rim a ton, which is a fair point in terms of the comparison with Shea, it's more about the attention that I think he could draw, and you're aware of that. But look at Devin Booker's third year in the NBA, and this is with slower pacing in the NBA than there is now. Devin Booker scored 25 a game with 5 assists and 5 boards. I think Tre could do that, and that's why he's a can't miss guy to me if he falls to 5. And if it is the third pick, say the Jazz were to trade up, we're going to discuss that possibility in a couple seconds here. But if he is the third pick, I think you still take him because he's a polished scorer with upside. It's not that he's better right now, and therefore you take the better right now player than Ace. I think he's got a higher upside than Ace, as a more probable likelihood he is a star, and I think it's a higher level of star that he can achieve than Ace Bailey because he's more athletic. He has a 38-inch vertical and 6'10" wingspan, and he's the best shooter in the first round. Like, there's a lot of stuff to like right now, and there's a lot of growth. So where are the areas that you think he could grow the most? And if he does, what does he become?
I think the biggest area is playmaking and defense. It's pretty clear that his defense is lacking. I think if you get him a system where Will Hardy holds his players accountable, you can see that upside. Because the way I see it, if you have athleticism like he does, you have the ability to play defense, and it's more of a want to. And I think Will Hardy does a good job of getting that out of people. That's one thing I'd say. And then the other thing I would say is playmaking. I think you see a little bit of it at Texas, but with the NBA spacing and more elite players around him, you're going to be able to see that a lot more. And if he is able to do that, I mean, five assists a game is not even close to what he could end up doing. Like, he could end up averaging 7 to 8 assists per game if he increases that playmaking along with that finishing. And I think that honestly, the finishing around the rim will work itself out with the NBA spacing.
Yeah, I think he gets to his spots, which is just as important as putting pressure on the rim, because then if there's more space, you can get further down the road. So we're going to talk about that possibility of the Jazz trading up to number 3, what the package would look like, because the 76ers are shopping that pick by all remarks. And maybe if the Jazz aren't the team that moves up to 3, how does that impact the Jazz's draft prospects at 5? All that and more straight ahead on Locked On Jazz, and it has us salivating over the possibility of getting Tre Johnson. But you know what else you'll be salivating over? It's Olipop. It's a new kind of soda made for people who love classic taste of soda but want something that supports their health. With just 2 to 5 grams of sugar and 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in every can, Olipop is the reimagining soda in a way that's better for your gut. Traditional sodas are loaded with sugar, like 39 grams in a regular Coke or 44 in an orange Fanta. Olipop, they flipped the script for just a fraction of the sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and gut-friendly ingredients like Ollie Smart, a blend shown to support digestive and overall health. It's soda that tastes like the real thing, but actually does something good for your body. whatever flavor you try first. Personally, I'm trying the root beer. I had this one, love it. This is the root beer flavor right here, and I've got a package of these sent to me by Olipop, and I'm thrilled that I'm just plowing through these down to my final two. So there's cherry cola, classic grape, maybe Dr. Goodwin, or maybe they're Dr. Pepper dupe, but my favorite, the root beer. So I don't know your story. If you're in Utah, you probably drank a lot of soda growing up. There's plenty of soda shops, and now you're looking for a better alternative because it's healthy, and this has the nostalgic flavors you grew up drinking, but is healthy. So how cool is that? That you can get a can of Olipop, and it gives you a third of your daily recommended fiber and taste delicious. So get a free can of Olipop. Just buy any 2 cans in a store and they'll reimburse you for one. Head to drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba to claim your free can and find Olipop near you. That's drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba. And I also want to tell you about the great people down at Murdoch Hyundai. Murdoch have been in Utah for over 80 years. Hyundai's the best car for your money. Safety features, bells, whistles, and all, and amazing cars for amazing prices. I can tell you guys about the Tucson, which I drove a lot last summer, and the Santa Fe and the Palisade have just equally fantastic reviews. There's also the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6, and the 6 is amazing. Looks just like a Porsche and won the World Car of the Year. And there are 3 locations in Linden, Murray, and Logan. I've worked with the people at Murray, and they're fantastic. So make sure to go down and check out the one nearest to you, and they'll take care of you. Alrighty, welcome back to Locked On Jazz. I'm Leaf Tulane, joined by Spencer Jones, and we talked about Tre Johnson as the best case scenario for the Jazz at 5. We also teased the idea that he might be the best pick at 3, and the Jazz would be fortunate to get him at 5. So let's discuss the possibility that the Jazz move up to 5, up from 5 to 3, or maybe have both picks, because there have been a lot of rumors circulating around Philly, and some of them involving the Jazz. You heard Bill Simmons float out a popular idea of Lauri Markkanen and for Paul George and 3, and it's because Paul George has an enormous contract, and the Jazz would then have pick 3 and 5, and Paul George to tutor the young guys. I don't know if that's the trade, but there's just too much smoke for there not to be a fire about Philly at least looking to move this trade. What are the possibilities that you think are most likely for Philly, and how does it impact the Utah Jazz?
I think ultimately the first outcome would be that they make the pick. And I think there's guys that can help them now at that position. That's one. I could see them trading back, and I think that would also be to get a player that's a little more solidified and will help them now rather than someone like Ace Bailey who's gonna be kind of more of a project. Um, but I could see us trading with the Sixers. I mean that Paul George contract is pretty brutal. And with regards to kind of what you mentioned with that potential trade, what do you say, Paul George 3 and for Lauri Markkanen?
I think that's got to be the framework for it. Because
Yeah.
the 76ers are a win now team. Like they had 24 wins, but they have Embiid who's aging, and they already need to win now before they price out of anything more with more money for Maxey and more money for McCain coming up. So I think it would have to be for Lowry. The only other alternative that I see is they make a trade with a team that's outside the lottery that really wants a top pick, and they say, yeah, we're going to try to change the way we do it. We're going to take a player from another team and see if that moves us over the needle more so than the top 3 pick. I just don't think there's that many teams that can give a package that moves the needle enough without giving too much. So I do think whether it's that or the Jazz making the trade, it impacts the Jazz, because if Philly makes the pick, I don't think they take Tre Johnson. And it's likely to me that it's Ace Bailey because of position. But the smoke is saying that Ace Bailey's falling. We talked about that yesterday on
hmm
Locked On Jazz. And then it makes the question, okay, is it Kama Malawach? Is it VJ Edgecombe? And so I just wanted to sift through that and see what your read is about how the Philly pick, whether it's picked by them or whomever they pick, how it directly correlates to what the Jazz do and what you think is the most likely thing to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they go with someone like Ace and they take him and they think, oh, he can be under Paul George's tutelage, I think that puts us in a really good spot to pick Trey. And selfishly, that would be my favorite outcome, is if Ace went 3. From all accounts, it sounds like Charlotte really, really likes VJ, which would have Trey fall to us. I think in the past couple of days, there has been some smoke that the Sixers would be interested in taking a player like VJ as well. And Maury, he typically likes to draft guys like VJ of that ilk, and so I think there's there. I mean, let's play through it. If VJ goes 3? I think Charlotte, you're there with Trey, Ace. I've heard Malawach. Is it Khan Knipple? I still think the Jazz honestly are in good position to have Trey there on the board, and if not, Ace. And from that perspective, I wouldn't mind having Ace. So if Trey were to go four or Trey were to go three and VJ goes four, that's an outcome that could potentially happen. And I would be perfectly okay to take Ace.
See, I'm with you on that. And so that's why I would stand pat if that outcome happens. And I anticipated you'd feel that way. So, what would the package have to be for you to feel like the Jazz need to move up with the 76ers? Would you do that trade, by the way, the Lauri for Paul George and three? And for those of you listening, the reason, even though he accurately described the Paul George contract as brutal, you'd stomach that contract. You'd have him teach the likes of a Tre Johnson or an Ace Bailey, and perhaps both if you were to keep 3 and 5. But even if you were to have to trade the other side of the pick, the idea would be that you would only have Paul George's contract for a short time, and it would open up money and cap space for when your youthful players are getting better, and you're turning into a better team as opposed to a team that has one or potentially in this case two top 5 picks.
I would do the initial trade where you said Lowry for Paul and three. I would have a hard time trading Lowry and five for Paul and three because I like where we're at five. I don't think there's a huge difference from 5 to 3, and I don't think it's worth trading a valuable asset like Lowry to do so. Um, I mean, you could convince me that maybe you do Lowry in 21 for Paul and three. If I
I
think
like
ultimately
that.
if we trade up for three, I would really want to keep five. I would not be pleased if we made a trade to go up to three. If we go up to two, yes, and I'll talk about that in our later segments, but I think the only way it would make sense to add our fifth pick is if we were going to go up to two.
I like the idea of 21 because I don't think Philly would do it just for the fifth pick for Lowry, and they'd give up two pieces because if you have Lowry for Paul George, Lowry's probably better than Paul George, but he's not exactly what they need unless they have an enormous leap from Jared McCain to put them into true playoff contention. So I think it gets complicated. We talked about Charlotte a little bit. This was about Philly, about the trades. I don't think the Jazz would make a trade with Charlotte to move up one. But if Charlotte makes a trade, I wonder how it changes the Jazz's pick because if Tre Johnson's there at 4 and someone comes calling up for Charlotte's pick, I think it's likely he's the one that's taken off the board unless it's Brooklyn who seems enamored with Jeremiah Fears.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Speaking of interesting, we've got some trades for you. Some of them are going to be some flashy names. Some of them we're gonna talk about the players that would be leaving Utah and what we think is likely to happen this offseason, and maybe some trades that we think are going to be beneficial for the Utah Jazz, even if it means some of the players that you've become familiar with over the last 2 seasons are on the way out. So all that and more straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trades, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. So Tyrese Halliburton's been balling all postseason long, so if you've been tracking, you could play. He could be the guy that you place a bet on. It could be assists, it could be points. He hasn't shot any free throws, so maybe that'll change and the number's really low. If you got a read on who's heating up, why not back it with the same game parlay? How could a $200 bonus bet in bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? You could be in line for quite a day right there if you follow those tips. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz, and the Jazz have to make trades this offseason. Like, that's going to happen. We've kind of all become impatient of saying, these are the trades we want. We heard big game hunting, and we thought, oh, is it going to be Giannis? Is it going to be all these different players? But instead, there have been negligible trades. They haven't really impacted the Jazz's franchise. I think this season we're going to see players that we've seen the last couple seasons on their way out, and I'm curious to see the format of which it happens. So I'll start by proposing one that I've been thinking deeply about, and that's Jrue Holiday. I wonder if the Celtics, because they have a cap sheet problem, need to make a deal and find a trade with someone. The Jazz just promoted Austin Ainge to the head honcho. And he was working with Brad Stevens, and apparently it was a tongue-in-cheek comment, but I believe it, where Brad Stevens says, "Oh, you want to make a deal?" Right away. So I wonder if Jrue Holiday would be a guy that would be someone that the Jazz would be interested in because of his leadership and, more importantly, his contract. His contract's in the 30 millions, and he's an aging player that I don't think puts the Jazz outside of the top 8, which means the Jazz would keep their pick, and they'd have someone to be a mentor to the younger guards, whether it's Jeremiah Fears, whether it's Tre Johnson, VJ Edgecombe. He's a very good mentor in that regard, teaches defensive traits and tendencies that would really help the Jazz because we have been anemic on that side of the basketball. So I think that's the trade that appeals to me the most. You then lose his contract as he ages out, and the Jazz have tons of cap room. What do you make of that trade, and do you think that one's at all likely?
I'm not sure how likely it is. I like the trade. I think what my mindset for every single trade I've thought about and going forward, especially for this year, is does that allow us to still be bad enough to take that pick in the top 8? And I think that's what's important. I don't want to make a trade that makes us better than we should be and gets us to the point where we have to give that pick to the Thunder. I really think that should be at the very top of our mind when we make any decisions this offseason. So if you, like you said, if you firmly believe that we can get Jrue Holiday and still end up as a bottom 4 or 5 team in the league, then by all means go for it. I love that idea, and I've always loved Jrue Holiday.
So let me ask you this. You said you want to make sure we're still in the bottom 8. I agree. What if you could get a guy like Jalen Brown? Because the Celtics need to make moves, and apparently the only untouchable is Jason Tatum. And what if it's Jalen Brown? What if it's Trae Young, Zion Williamson? Are any of these appealing enough to you to say, okay, that number 8 pick we might have to convey, but we got Jalen Brown, which is better than likely to be any of these picks. Is there any world that sways you?
I think Jalen Brown could maybe do it. Zion wouldn't, and Trae Young wouldn't. I would definitely have to think about it. The thing is Jalen Brown's contract is huge.
Yep.
It's a massive amount of money. But I would think about it. I still would rather have someone like Jrue if you were to tell me that we could finish in the bottom 8 and take that pick next year.
All right, final thought for you here. You have some thoughts on it. Let's briefly touch on who would have to go out for a Jrue Holiday one, and then I'll give you your trade that you've been brewing up. So who would have to leave for Jrue Holiday? Like, is it Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson? Is that how the money has to work, or do you think it could be John Collins? What's the appealing trade, and how do you see the Jazz offseason going in terms of those veterans being on the Utah Jazz in the future or not?
You know, obviously financially you have to make it work. I'm not super in tune with how much extra cap space we have, but it does seem like it'd have to be someone like Sexton and Clarkson. I believe between those two, that's about 32 million. If you were to do Collins and Clarkson, that's 39, if I did that math right. And then Collins and Sexton puts you at about 45. So I think it looks more like Clarkson and Sexton, they're on expiring contracts and gives the Celtics flexibility going forward. Meanwhile, if you want to compete, you can re-sign Sexton if they have mutual interest. I think it probably looks like that. If I had to choose between one kind of pairing, I would probably do Sexton and Clarkson.
So what do you think the likelihood is that Colin Sexton, John Collins, and Jordan Clarkson are all gone? Like, who is the most likely to be gone, and do you think it's likely that all three are gone by the start of this upcoming season?
I would say most likely is probably John Collins, or Sexton. I think the Jazz are probably more infatuated with Sexton than Collins, which is why I would put Collins ahead of him. But I think out of those two, they had a pretty good year, and so playing wise, I think they're more appealing than Clarkson to the other teams. But if I had to guess, I think all three of them are gone.
I agree. So now without further ado, you've been brewing up a trade. What is the trade that you think is feasible that you also really like for the Utah Jazz? And I have a sense I know which team it's going to be because this team is redundantly built and has some players that the Jazz have sorely lacked in that type of archetype. So lay it on us.
Well, I think there's a couple. There's one that have talked about, and you actually mentioned. that I'm going to throw in here first, and that's for Damian Lillard. And that would simply be just Sexton and Collins for Lillard and draft capital from them. And I think the idea of having someone hurt, like kind of like I mentioned, it's going to allow us to be able to be bad. You bring Damian Lillard back next year, or the year after that, and you kind of can start competing a little bit. I like that idea. The other team that I really like as a trade partner is the Orlando Magic. Um, they desperately need guard play and some shooting. So if you were to put Colin Sexton in a package, I have been a massive Jonathan Isaac fan forever. Fortunately, with injuries and stuff, I think his career decline offensively. So you're trading him for the defensive aspect and salary. A lot of the stuff I've seen has been Jonathan Isaac and Cole Anthony for Sexton and I don't know how I feel. I'm not the biggest Cole Anthony fan, but if we could find a way to move up, so if you paired 21 and Sexton for 16 and salary filler from them, that's potential. I guess it depends on what you truly want. Because honestly, in an ideal
Can you
world
get
for
a
me,
Jalen Suggs in this?
I want Jalen Suggs.
Yeah.
If I'm in an ideal world, imagine if we could have Jalen Suggs and Tre Johnson in the backcourt. I think there's maybe some point guard skills you might be missing there, but if you, in an ideal world, that's what I'd want. I'd want Jalen Suggs. We'll give you Sexton. We'll give you Clarkson. If we had to throw in a pick, 21, that's fine. But if we could get our hands on Jalen Suggs, I would be absolutely ecstatic.
Do you think Suggs is more available than Anthony Black? I mean, he's older, so he's costs more money. So then they have a younger version. Like I get that, but I'd be curious to see if one of them's more valuable than the other. But the other one sees that their path to real stardom in their role is obscured, and therefore the Jazz could capitalize on that vision. I do think it's likely that they probably try to get rid of a Cole Anthony, and maybe we can give them a better version of Cole Anthony and Colin Sexton, but Colin Sexton costs more and provides a veteran win now potential piece for them, and we are rewarded with what they have a redundant load of in terms of defensively oriented guards. So I like that vision as well. I think the Jazz are likely to have uh, no John Collins. I'd imagine that Colin Sexton will be dealt. Jordan Clarkson becomes interesting because there's few teams that could really use him, and I think Orlando is one that could use Jordan Clarkson. However, his last 2 years haven't been all that inspiring in terms of his offensive outlook. So I don't know if his market's as high as it once was. I thought he'd be traded at a deadline a couple years ago at the same time Mike Conley was. So I'll be very curious. I do think that the Jazz have at least two of those three players that have been here forever, Collins, Clarkson, Sexton, not on roster. I'd imagine it's almost more likely all three are gone. I think the Jazz will have a newfound backcourt in that sense, whether it's a Jalen Suggs or if it's a Jrue Holiday and a more marquee splash. I think that's where the trade's going to be. I find it harder to make a big time front court trade. I don't expect a Giannis. I don't expect one of those type of players who commands win now attention. I think the most blockbuster we could ever see is Jaylen Brown. And I have a hard time thinking Jaylen Brown's going to end up anywhere other than Boston. So the one Celtic that sounds the most likely to be traded to me is Jrue Holiday.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Well, that'll do it for us on Locked On Jazz. It's been a pleasure having you on, joining us, giving us your draft takes. And Tre Johnson, Spencer's guy, he might have even beaten me to the punch of Tre Johnson. I shared my Shea comparison with him probably in November, so that's been brewing for a while. I felt confident eventually. That's best case scenario in the draft. Best case scenario in the trades. We heard it there. Please let us know what you think in the comments. Do you like those trade proposals? Let us know if you have better trade proposals, and we'll be back next week with Tony Jones and Andy Larson talking about some of those trade proposals, talking about the likelihood of the deals we proposed here, and talking about who they would take if they're the Utah Jazz. Do they differ in opinion because we both like Tre Johnson? Andy Larson talked about he liked VJ Edgecombe as a role player, seeing that he thinks it's a fewer star draft than we perceive it to be. So let us know what you guys think. We really appreciate it. Thank you for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NBA Big Board. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. So find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And we'll see you guys next week. It's been a pleasure.